Hello, my name is John Goetz, and welcome to another episode of GNL Voice. Our guest today is Stowe Shoemaker, Dean of the UNLV Harrah College of Hospitality since 2013. And prior to his tenure as Dean, Dr. Shoemaker worked as a faculty member at several institutions, including UNLV, the University of Houston, and Cornell executive education part there, as well as a consultant for the hospitality industry in such sectors as F&B, hotels, healthcare, and gaming. Dean Shoemaker is an award-winning hospitality expert and has published 2 marketing textbooks, and his 3rd book is scheduled out to be released very soon and explores the intersection of hospitality and healthcare. Dean Shoemaker, welcome to GNL Voice.
Well, it's great to be here. I'm honored to be part of this conversation, part of the Voice. I love GNL magazine, and it's really an honor to write for it. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
You're very welcome. One question I had is, you meant in your bio, you went to the university, or you taught at the University of Houston. I went to the University of Houston. I worked on my master's degree there, and I taught freshman comp.
Oh, congratulations.
In the late 80s. So when did our paths cross by any chance?
No, they didn't. I was there from 2004 to 2012.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a cougar, and the university has done amazing things.
Yeah, I
not as
really
great as UNLV, but some amazing things.
Yeah, I really liked my time at University of Houston, and I remember the first time I set foot on a lawn in Houston. It was like stepping on a sponge because the water just kind of squirted up. It was kind of
very humid there compared to Las Vegas.
Yes. So Dean Shoemaker, you have written several articles for GNL magazine about the loyalty circle. You know, there's you're working on, or we're about to publish the 3rd part called, for communication. Can you give us a synopsis of the 3 parts of the loyalty circle and what it means for the industry?
Yes, so thank you very much. So, one of the things we often talk about in the hospitality industry is how do we really create loyalty among our guests? How do we create emotional bonds? And everybody always has ideas, very tactical solutions that we should do. We should smile more. When the guest is 10 feet away, we should say something. We should address them in our emails, using their first and full name. But a lot of tactical things. And as I was really developing my career and focusing on loyalty, I really thought, well, we need to think strategically about loyalty. In other words, if everybody has a great idea, how do these ideas fit together? And then how do they keep the customer to always keep coming back? And so I developed what we really call the loyalty circle. And the loyalty circle has been used it was originated for customers, but now we're using it also with employees. How do we keep our employees? But the idea is that there's 3 components of the loyalty circle. There's process, value, and communication. And I'll talk about each one of those briefly. But the point is, when you see the loyalty circle, the idea is everything has to be done equally well. The process has to go well, the value has to go well, and the communication. If we're great at offering great value, but we communicate improperly, then the guest is not going to become loyal. And I'll give you a quick example. I took my wife to my favorite resort in Southern California. And we've been going to this resort for many years, and I felt that I was part of their family. We're scheduled to go. We're about 2 months prior to our visit, and we get a letter from them with our name spelled wrong. Mine is addressed as Dr. Shoemaker. My wife is addressed as Mrs. Shoemaker, even though she has her PhD. And we're presented with an offer that says, "You're such a great customer. Why don't you, if you come to the resort during this time period, we'll give you a 2-for-1 spa visit." And we were already planning to come. And so I sort of felt like, wow, they really didn't know me. They didn't know when I was coming. They didn't really know who I was. And I was kind of hurt because I had been giving all my loyalty to them, and I felt nothing had come back. But if they had written to me and said, hey, doctor and doctors, we're so excited you're coming back. You haven't been here since last year. You're such a great customer. We really want to give you a 2-for-1 spa visit. Same offer, but totally different approach.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
And so the idea is you can always think of different ideas where we communicate perfectly, but we're not adding any value. We're etc. So that's how I came about with the model. And as I said, there's 3 components. The process is everything that happens from the time the customer thinks about doing business with you to the time they leave. Okay. And within the process, as I talked about in that first article, we talk about gaps in service quality. In other words, where is it that we think we know what the guest wants, but we give them something different? And so everything that happens in the process is everything that relates to our interactions with the guest. Okay. And it starts prior to the arrival and it ends after they leave. When we talk about value, we're really talking about 2 types of value. We're talking about value added and value recovery. Now, value added means what are we doing in our service and our product that's adding value than just providing what they're actually buying, right? So in other words, when I go to this resort, I'm really buying, I'm on the ocean and I'm buying a comfortable room. But what's some other values that we can offer? And we often define values. And again, I talk about this in the article as, financial. But it's not just financial value, it's emotional value. How do we, recognize the guests, make them feel really special? It's the social value. How do we organize so that if they're traveling, they're meeting other people and there's kinds of events happening? There's the functional value. Does the product and service, it doesn't work the way it's supposed to work? And so all of those are different types of value that we want to make sure that we're providing to the guest. So when they leave, they go, wow, that was not only a great experience, but a great value. They recognize me. Everything worked the way it was supposed to. I met some amazing people in the bar. All of that becomes part of this value added. And then value recovery occurs when we have a service failure and things go wrong. And the question becomes is how do we recuperate from that, right? Do we give the guest the opportunity to express their frustration? Do we actually show that we're following up? And how we handle the value recovery will have a long-term effect on how we think about the property. We often joke sometimes that I've been in operations for a long time before I became an academic. And we kind of say, you want to just mess up the stage just enough so you can show them how great you are on the recovery. And they'll go, wow, we lost something, but they came in and then again, you get them talking, right? Mm-hmm. And so value recovery is really critical.
So when in that example you gave with you and your wife, how did they recover themselves?
No.
Aha.
Because on the same stay, my wife's iPad was taken out of the room. We went to complain. We came back and it was there in the same place. A policeman came down and said he wanted to know everything about it. We explained that it had gone, but then when we complained, it came back. So we think somebody had taken it. They said, oh, we'll follow up with you. We're going to look into this. And we haven't heard anything since. And we've never gone back to the resort. And that's an example of really poor value recovery.
Does that then tie into the third component, communication and the word of mouth?
Absolutely.
Okay. So
absolutely.
I guess it kind of goes to that adage when you get good service, you hear people never say anything, but when you get bad service, it multiplies.
Exactly. Although there are lots of things we can do to create great word of mouth, and we'll talk about that right now because it's going to be coming out in my article. But I think what's important about word of mouth and communication, there's kind of a very famous saying by a gentleman named John Wanamaker, who at one point department stores were big in the United States, like a long time ago when I was a little kid. And John Wanamaker said, I know that only 50% of my advertising works. The problem is I don't know what 50%. And so consequently, people sort of said, well, word of mouth is important, but we can't put a value to it. Okay. And what I've really learned over my career in marketing and in academia and in consulting and research is that many people who got initially into marketing and into services did so because they hated numbers, right? Like people say, oh, I'm creative. I want to be in marketing, right? I want to design promotions. But then what happens is anytime we design something cool, we go to the CFO and they say no, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or they say, tell me why it's going to work. And we say, oh, it's great because it's so clever. How does it work, right? And so what I realized was in marketing, in order to get things accomplished, we have to learn to speak finance. And by that, I mean, we have to be able to determine how do we actually calculate the value of word of mouth? How do we calculate the value of promotions, et cetera? And so I spent a lot of time, really doing research in that area and really reading to see what are other people doing to measure word of mouth. And so in my article that should be coming out soon, I talk about different ways to calculate word of mouth, which we can talk about right now if you'd like.
That'd be great, Dean Shoemaker, because one of the things that really intrigued me about the communication component was the mathematical component of how you calculate some of that, and that's what I was hoping to get into today, because that really intrigued me.
Yeah, it's amazing what math will do.
Yes, it is.
It helps us tell the story. And in research, we kind of joke that we say we want to throw enough statistics at it until the data speaks and screams in agony. But so let me just talk about a couple ways that we measure word of mouth, and probably many of our listeners are familiar with that. Probably the first one that everybody seems to know is what we call the Net Promoter Score. Excuse me. And the Net Promoter Score really developed by a consultant for McKinsey many, many years ago. And he wrote an article in Harvard Business Review called "The One Number Firms Should Be Concerned About." And the Net Promoter Score is on a 0 to 10 scale, where the question is, how likely is it you would recommend X to a friend? 10 means extremely likely, and 0 means not at all likely. Mm-hmm. And what we do with the Net Promoter Score is we say, people who rate an 8 or a 7, they're kind of sort of wishy-washy. So let's remove the percent that rate an 8 or a 7, and let's take the percent that rate a 9 or a 10 and subtract that from the percent that rated, 6 through 0. And that becomes our Net Promoter Score. So for example, if we have, and let me just do some quick calculations. If we have, 9, let's say we have 70% rated a 9 or a 10, we have 20% who rated a 7 or an 8, and we have 10% who rated 6 down, we would take 70 minus 10, so our Net Promoter Score would be 60%, if I clarified that well. Mm-hmm. And so what firms try to do is they say, okay, how likely are my people going to talk about us? What's our Net Promoter Score? And then we sort of take a look at operationally, what can we do to get people talking about us? Okay, because the more we get people talking about us and the more they have a better stay, the more likely they are to recommend us. And then our Net Promoter Score will go up. So firms spend a lot of time trying to figure out what do we need to do to increase our satisfaction, but then also get people to talk about us. And then our Net Promoter Score becomes a metric that helps measure our satisfaction of our customers and our word of mouth.
Okay. Is the organization's goal I take it's to increase that Net Promoter Score, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, you always want to have a very high Net Promoter Score.
Okay, so it's if I remember my marketing days of marketing classes, you had your three blocks, A, B, and C. You wanted to get C's into the B block, B's into the A block, and then the A's.
Yes.
Yeah. So is that similar?
Yeah, it's very similar. Yeah, we want to have people talk about us.
Mhm.
And I think the thing we often forget, why word of mouth is so important in services. And it's because when we think of services, there's the characteristics of a service. It's intangible. We can't touch or we can't feel it, right? We buy it at the same time we consume it. So we can't go pick it up or with a car test drive it, bring it back, see if we like it, right? We have heterogeneity in terms of the service, right? One day I'm a great teacher, the next day I'm terrible because I was in a bad mood or I had a headache, right?
Mm-hmm.
Same with service. One day they can be great, the next day they can be terrible, right? So we have heterogeneity. And then we also, of course, have intangibility, which I think I mentioned. So those characteristics, because we're buying it when we're consuming it, it's hard to tell whether or not it's going to work. So what do? We ask our friends. And I encourage all the listeners to think about, when was the last time you were trying to decide where to go for a meal? And you ask somebody, hey, where should we go? And did you actually go to that restaurant? Or did you tell your friends, hey, I'm thinking of going to restaurant A, and your friend says, oh, you don't want to go to restaurant A, I just came there, it was terrible. And then you change your decision, right? And so then that really helps drive, the value of word of mouth. Like, are we losing customers because of word of mouth, or are we gaining customers because of word of mouth? And that's where I spend a lot of time in this article talking about how to calculate that value.
And if we could get into that, it's kind of, you use the word intangible, and trying to get a number around word of mouth seems to me kind of obscure, but you did it.
Well, I did it, but with the help of some very bright people from Harvard.
Okay.
Who actually did it before me, and I kind of took their idea and applied it to a casino that I did some consulting with overseas to see what the value of word of mouth was for them, and to show that the calculations that we're using could be used in the real world, not just an academic case study. But before I get into the actual calculations of word of mouth, and I had to put my glasses on because I'm at that age where things don't appear as crystal clear as they used to.
Yeah, my readers just stay on all the time now. I don't
But so to sort of set the stage for the value of word of mouth, it comes down to what is the value of the individual customer over their lifetime. In other words, I go to this hotel and I spend money and they make money on that one stay. But what's the value of me if I'm going to keep coming back to that property over 10 or 15 years, right? Because what happens, we know, is that as our loyalty increases, our lifetime value increases, which makes sense, right? The more loyal we are, the more we're going to spend. But if you think about it, not just for the individual customer, but all our customers. So if a higher percentage of our customers keep staying with us, their value increases over their lifetime. Okay. If, however, we see a lot of defections in our customer base, in other words, people come and then they leave, the lifetime value of that customer becomes less. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because what we're really trying to do is we're not so much looking at the individual customer, but we're looking at a hypothetical set of customers. And what's the value of that hypothetical set of customers? And you remember that Hampton Inn came up with the 100% guarantee. If you're unhappy with your room for any reason, your stay is free. Okay. And what that did was they found out that, well, that'll get people to stay there more often. So their lifetime value is going to become a lot more. So even though it may be, I'd lose $100 on that guest, but that guest is not worth $100 to me. They may be worth $10,000 because they're going to be coming to me over their lifetime. I made a good decision by giving that free room away.
And did it work for Hampton Inn?
It worked tremendously well, incredibly well.
Okay.
Oh yeah, Hampton Inn is one of the most successful brands today. It was started by Promise, which was a Holiday Inn brand, and it was sold to Hilton. And it's one of their top selling brands.
Okay.
And in fact, Starwood does the same thing. They don't do 100%, they do pretty much 100% guarantee with their Starwood program points. And even, I was very fortunate. I came back from France the other day. I was on Delta. Our plane when we landed in Salt Lake City, it came in late. There was a mechanical error. We had to get off, change planes, wait for the new plane to come. Delta Airlines sent everybody a certificate for $15 worth of free food, a voucher. And we were on the ground for maybe 20 minutes.
Oh, wow.
But the fact that, and everybody was talking about, hey, did you get your voucher? Right? And everybody ran to the Starbucks, right? And we're all in line with our vouchers because the value of the word of mouth. They knew that service failure, people won't remember that their plane was delayed and they had to get mechanical. What they remember is, hey, I got $15 and was able to get something to eat.
Yeah, or a single cup of coffee.
A single cup of coffee, especially airport coffee.
Airport coffee. So do organizations, when they're valuing or incentivizing these high value guests, do they tend to forget about the loyal ones and focus on getting other ones up that ladder? Because what's the advantage of being a loyal guest, I guess, if they're going to focus on everyone else?
Well, no, we focus on everybody. We want everybody to be happy and we want everybody to be loyal. But we want to, because at least in the hospitality business, because we have limited capacity, right? In terms of the number of hotel rooms, the number of show tickets, the number of front row seats that can see Celine Dion, see Taylor Swift or whoever. And so we have a capacity constraints. So the question always comes down, if we have one seat left, one ticket left, one room left, who should get that room ticket? Should it go to the person who calls first, or should it go to the most valued customer, right? Because if I'm a valued customer and I'm spending a lot of money and I'm staying at this hotel or resort all the time, and I call up and say, hey, I want to go see Taylor Swift. And they say, oh, you should have called us yesterday when we had tickets available. We don't have any more available, right? That's the communication. Now I'm crazy, right? Where if they had called me and said, hey, Dr. Shoemaker, Taylor Swift's coming to town. We got a bunch of tickets. Are you interested in coming? Right?
Right.
And so it's a very different approach. So the idea is, in order to determine who those really valuable customers are, we create all the loyalty programs. And we can look at, depending on the tier they are, what's their lifetime value, right? What's their value in terms of word of mouth, which we'll calculate in a second. But does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah. The reason I ask that is, I get emails or I go to a website, and this is, not necessarily hospitality related, but I placed an order before, and then it pops up a message, you get 10% off if this is your first order. It doesn't matter that I'm a loyal customer, but I have to be the first time. And that gets annoying after a while, that the only people who get rewarded are the newbies. So that's kind of what I was wondering.
Yeah, and see that's an example of the loyalty circle running amok, right? Because the process, it makes it very easy to order. You get it, it comes the next day. It adds value because they probably also, if it's Amazon, they recommend other things you might like. But then they communicate with you in a way that makes it sound like you're the first time you've ever bought from them.
Yeah.
So now you're not as loyal. right? And what we know about disloyalty is that if an organization shows disloyalty to us, we tend to be promiscuous also, right?
Mhm.
So we may have never thought about going to another online shopping, but now all of a sudden you're thinking, well, they really don't know who I am. So it really doesn't matter if I buy from someone else, right? And so that's a good example of the loyalty circle not working because 2/3 were perfect, but the communication wasn't.
Okay. Yeah. That's just
All right.
something I've thought about a lot. And then, I corresponded it to your article, and I thought they need to read up on all of this.
They do need to read up on that. Yeah, so make sure they send like a box of copies.
Yes.
And send all three of them to them so that
Yes.
they know all three together. But getting back to one quick question on the loyalty. We have different tiers of people, obviously, and the goal is to keep enticing everybody to move up a tier, right? So the
Mhm.
basic, I come in and buy, I become a member of the program, I see the benefits, I keep buying, I get more and more of my wallet goes to that one firm, and I keep rising up in the tiers, and I get more and more benefits. So that's how that all works, which is, I think, pretty clear to all our listeners.
Yeah. Yep.
So now, let me give a quick example on the lifetime value of the customer, or the value that the customer is worth. If, for example, what we do is when we're calculating the lifetime value of a customer, we come up with a hypothetical sample. So I've always used, we have a hypothetical 1,000 customers. All right. And if the customers, if we have, well, actually, the example I've used in my article, I have 5,000 customers. So we have 5,000 customers. If each customer spends $148, our total revenue is $740,000. That's essentially the number of customers times
Yep.
their sales price. If our variable cost is 45%, then our variable costs are roughly 333,000. So our gross profit of those 5,000 customers is $407,000. Pretty straightforward.
Mhm.
Now, when we look at the lifetime value of the customer, we're always looking at what's their future value discounted back to today, the net present value.
Oh, yeah.
And as you probably remember from, and our listeners will remember from their favorite class in high school, which was probably geometry or statistics, that the net present value is 1 plus I, to the end. And in our first year, n is 0. And as we all remember, anything to the 0 is just 1. So in the first year, our profit is 407,000. We divide that by 5,000 customers, and each customer is worth $81 to us. Pretty straightforward. And again, if you're getting confused as we're talking, you want to wait for the article to come out. And then you want to be sure to read it.
Yes.
Because you go, now I know what the heck he was talking about. Okay. So now, if in year 2, instead of 5,000 customers, we have 2,900 customers. So we've had some customers defect. We don't know which ones, so we're still using the 5,000. So we have 2,900 customers. They spend $150 because a year from now, prices go up. Our total revenue is going to be $461,000. Our variable costs stay at 45%. So our variable costs are $207,000. And our gross profit is to be $253,000. Yeah, plus or minus. So if our interest rate is 15%, and let's hope it's not, but for my example, it is. I mean, we only hope that is just we have a lot of cash laying around, but otherwise we don't. But in my example, I used 15%. So our net present value then is going to be our $253,000 divided by 1.15, because we're discounting that back. So our gross profit for that second year is going to be 600 and, or excuse me, yeah, our net profit after discounting it back is 220,000. We take that 220, we add it to the 401, and our cumulative net present value is roughly $627,000. We divide that by our initial 5,000. And so the lifetime value now is $125. And what we basically said is that in that first year, the customer is worth $81 to us. But if they come back, they're actually going to be worth $125. Okay, so if we have a service failure and it says it costs us $100 to solve that problem, traditional general managers would say, hey, we only made $80. We're not going to pay $100 to fix it. But if we say, well, wait a minute, if that customer stays, he's not, or he or she is not worth $81, but they're actually worth $125. So let's spend that $100, solve their problem, and we're still going to be profitable because we essentially made $25.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the whole process of the individual lifetime value of the customer.
And so that value, that $125, is that in what we're talking about per visit, or is that over time, or what does that
It's
represent?
over time. It's
Okay.
over time. It's what they're going to be worth to us over time. And if the customer stays 5 years, or yeah, it's actually in 3 years, in my example in the article, he or she is actually worth $147. Okay, because what we're doing is we're saying hypothetically, if we keep this customer for 3 years, he or she is going to be worth to us not the $81 we saw in their first visit, but theoretically they could give us they're really worth $147 to us.
So they're, approaching almost doubling their value over those years.
Exactly. Yeah. And one of the things we always want to think about in promotions and is that we often look at a promotion and we say, how much did we spend? How much did we receive? If we received more than we spent, did we make money? And should we do the promotion again? Where what we should say is, how much did we spend? How many customers do we get? If we keep those customers over their lifetime, what's their true spend going to be? And so the individual promotion may lose money, but it gets customers in looking at us, buying from us. We turn them into lifetime value customers and they become better.
Is there, transitioning into word of mouth, is there a value to that one person who's worth $147 and what they are telling their friends? So that one person who's worth $147 is bringing in new people that are starting at $80.
Yes.
True?
Very true. So the word of mouth, and this is a good example, leads to our really next discussion, because we can calculate the value of word of mouth. And for the listener, if you hear paper rumbling, that's because I'm looking at my article and want to make sure I get it all correct.
Okay.
But the word of mouth calculation, I really credit a gentleman named Roger Hallowell and Abby Hansen from Harvard Business School. And they actually wrote a case study that I've used a lot over time on a true place in Michigan called Frankenmuth. And so I credit Roger Halloway and Abby for this case study that they wrote on Frankenmuth, Michigan. And to calculate the value of word of mouth, they had 5 things. What's the likelihood that the customer will refer the property? Okay, that's kind of, and that goes back to our net promoter score, the likelihood that the customer will refer the property.
Yep.
The number of people to whom the recommendation will be made. In other words, how many people are going to tell? What's the percentage of referrals that are empathetic? In other words, they're going to act on what they heard. And what's the probability of those who are empathetic will actually buy the service? And then the last one is the lifetime value of the customer. Okay. And so the idea is in their case, they came up with those kind of 5 questions. And, you know, when I talk with industry folks, their big issue is, well, that's ridiculous, because how do we know the percentage of people that are empathetic?
Right.
And how do we know that people that are empathetic would actually buy the service? Mm-hmm. Right. And so that doesn't mean anything to me. And so I say, well, wait a minute, let's rethink about this. Let's take those 5 questions and really turn them into 3 questions. How likely would you be to recommend this property to a friend? And in the example I use in the text, I say 1, not at all likely, 10, very likely. Okay, 1 to 10 scale. How many people will you talk to about your experience? And the third, of the people you talk to, how many do you think would actually make a similar purchase? Okay, so I've reduced those 5 questions into 3 simple ones. And because we're using statistics, we're estimating means, and means have variances. So we may not get the exact true number, but we're going to know that 95 times out of 100, the true answer will fall within a certain range. Mm-hmm. Okay, and think about your behavior. So how likely would I recommend this restaurant? Very likely. How many people am I going to tell about my experience? I got 5 or 6 friends I'm going to tell them. If I have 100 people on Facebook, I'd put in 100, right? If I'm an influencer, right? These are why influencers are so important. I got millions of people. And of the people, you know, how many do you think would actually buy that? Think about your own behavior. We put this when we talk to customers. How many times out of 10 visits, out of 10 purchases, how many times did you not do a purchase because someone told you not to do it? Right? That would be another way to word that question. And that gives us the value. So then we can multiply all those numbers together, and we can come up with roughly the lifetime value, the value of that word of mouth. And again, I know for the listener, you're going, oh, this numbers, it's too hard to understand, right? But what I'm trying to do is to get you thinking that, first of all, wow, I can't wait to read the article. But second, when you do read the article, you'll be able to follow it a little more, more likely to follow the article, because you'll have remembered me talking about that there are calculations that we can use that help us guide what the value of that word of mouth is.
And they're relatively easy calculations. It's not, you know, calculus or trigonometry. It's a couple of variables and boom, you have a value there. And but still it's pretty amazing how that number is.
Yeah, and that's the thing that we always want to remember, is that it is fairly easy to calculate. And look, we make huge decisions using consumer research, right? And whenever we're doing consumer research, we're never getting the exact number, but we're getting is 95 times out of 100, where's that number going to fall? Excuse me, where's that number going to fall? And in consumer research, when we're talking to consumers, we can have kind of a wide range, right? The bigger the sample size, obviously, the narrower the range. You know, if we're doing brain surgery, we want a really tight range. You know, we don't want a doctor that says, yeah, you know, survivor failure, plus or minus, you know, out of 100, maybe plus or minus 10, 90 sometimes, 110. We want like 0, right?
Yeah, yep.
And so we shouldn't get hung up, although people are going to guess. well, people will sort of guess, but we're still going to get a range that helps us guide what it's worth.
Mhm. Back, I've been in the gaming, is involved with gaming since late 80s, early 90s. And that is when, database marketing first came into the
Yes.
foray. And the big thing when I first started, in the industry and doing some consulting was the birthday query. And that's really the world of the marketing department back then. And it's really evolved. Now just sending an offer on someone's birthday, there's some math behind it,
Absolutely. And I think, look at the big companies have data scientists, right? Who are doing a lot of math. I mean, my PhD, my minor was in statistics and biometrics, and I did a lot of math, right? And there's room for really bright people to do really heavy math, and that's a good thing.
Mhm.
But what I tried to show in my research and my articles is you don't have to have a PhD in statistics or a minor in statistics, but you can get an access to data in a very inexpensive, easy way to do it. And that's what I'm trying to do. So I'm trying to get the smaller companies who don't have PhDs on their staff to at least get an understanding of how this could work in my organization. And that's really what's the purpose of this article, because I certainly could have written, and I've written articles using, probe and logistic models to determine whether that person really spent more on the free night or not.
Yeah.
And you look at the page and it's Greek, because there's all these Greek letters, and I always come up with what I call MEGO, MEGO. My eyes glaze over. and I didn't want our readers to go Shoemaker, MEGO, and then toss it, right? We want them to go, oh, Shoemaker, maybe I can understand this. And now I can see how I apply it. And that's how I've tried to write the article.
Yeah, I work every issue and putting together the articles, and I've enjoyed all of them. So I was excited when Jeannie and Allison told me that, you were agreeing to do an interview. So I was, I'm going to jump on it.
I mean, look, we stand on the head of giants, and my articles are well written, really, because I have an amazing person I work with, a woman named Angela Ramsey, who's she's the director of communication here at the Harrow College of Hospitality. And she won't let me send out anything without her looking at it first. and so at the end of my article, I always highlight her, because you can have great ideas, but if you can't communicate them, there are no ideas at all. And Angela is a person who's helped me quite a bit. So it's important that the reader acknowledges that I have help in what I write.
Yeah, and just so our viewers know, if you could zoom out Dean Shoemaker, I think Angela's in the room with you, so maybe our viewers can say hi to Angela if you're willing, Angela. There you are. Hi, Angela.
Hello.
Yeah, we've talked before, and I thank you for all of your help on the articles too. So
You're welcome.
Dean Shoemaker, our time is about up. So if any of our viewers or listeners had questions about the loyalty circle, how do you want them to contact you?
Well, I think the easiest way to do it is my phone number at work is 702-895-3308. That's 702-895-3308. The email address is just hospitalitycollege@unlv.edu. That's just hospitalitycollege@unlv.edu. And we're happy to be of any assistance that we can. I've actually written quite a few articles on loyalty and pricing, and if people send that email, it'll get filtered. It'll eventually reach me, and be sure to send them, the article. And they can also, of course, get copies of the article by reaching out to you,
Yes. Yes.
for the website. So if they realize that, wow, I missed articles 1 and 2, they can talk to you to get copies of those.
Yes, they can at mygamingleisure.com. So
Yeah.
Dean Shoemaker, you have a third book coming out. What's the title and when is that coming out?
I do have a third book coming out. I'm really excited about it. It's called Hospitable Healthcare, Just What the Patient Ordered. And my co-author and I, he had spent many, many years in marketing, in hospitality marketing, a gentleman named Peter Yesevich. When he sold his advertising agency, he went and worked with Cancer Treatment Centers of America for 10 years. When I was living in Houston, I had a joint appointment at MD Anderson Cancer Treatment Center. MD Anderson. When I was in Houston, I had a joint appointment at University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center. And so because of our knowledge in hospitality, we said, let's trace the history of hospitality and how they become very guest and service focused. And let's tie that into healthcare so we can teach healthcare executives how to become better at the patient experience. And we're hoping there'll be a big market for it. And full disclosure, the 2 textbooks I wrote, I called them the Betamax of marketing textbooks. They were the better technology, but they never just got adopted. But we're hoping this one will actually be the VCR and just sell like crazy. But more importantly, I think what it'll do is I think we all have had experiences where we just can't believe how poorly our doctors treat us. They may give us great medical advice, but the personal interactions don't work. And our goal is really to help change healthcare and provide some great tools, easy tools that doctors, hospitals, clinics can easily apply so they can get, the emotional side of healthcare squared away.
Well, cool. I thank you for your time. And
yes,
it was very nice talking to you. Very nice meeting you.
It was great talking to you. And I love the magazine. I love working with your team and very much appreciate it.
You're very welcome. So take care, and we'll hopefully, get another interview scheduled here in the near future. So,
anytime.
Okay.